Oh, anyway, your new album.
Hey!
Yeah, I've certainly been enjoying that. I did a review of this on my channel. I don't know if you managed to catch that. Um,
Yes.
but the album, to me, I'm listening to it. It sounds very much as if it's cut from similar cloth as those early Kingdom Come records, and even the Crazy World of Arthur Brown. I'm just wondering, is there supposed to be a continuation, somehow link in with those records?
I think it's really the fact that the roots of the music in blues and there's some jazzy feel and I suppose soul, yeah, soul music. That's something that's present in all of the ones you've mentioned, and because it was the music that, say, even though Rick Patton, who I did this album with, is 10 years younger than I am, the same roots he has, I have, and so I think that's it really.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned soul music. So I made the point in my review that I feel your singing owes more is more reminiscent of something like James Brown than anything else, than Screaming Jay Hawkins, for example, who is a guy that's always cited as being a big influence. But I hear this very soulful elements in the way you sing.
I had the pleasure of seeing James Brown in 1965,
Right.
in Paris at the Olympia.
Wow.
And I was just amazed. It was in the period where I was my first professional engagement in Paris, and I had a residency in a club there. And before that, I had been at Reading University, and there was a guy there who
Reading's
came.
my hometown.
Ah,
Yes.
which one?
Sorry?
Reading.
Reading's my hometown, yes.
Ah, then you must know lots of priests and policemen.
Yes, and lots of pubs as well. Many of them are shut now, unfortunately.
Oh dear, that's a shame.
Yeah.
They brought out all sorts of new the lager that came in and all sorts of things while I was in Reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, there's Huntley and Palmer's just up the road in Reading. I don't know if you remember Huntley and Palmer's.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. How could you not know Huntley and Palmer's?
Yeah.
I bet you even the president of Japan knows Huntley and Palmer's.
Absolutely.
But yeah, when I was at Reading, this guy came up to me and he said, I was doing blues and the bigger sounding blues that were move away from the country blues. And he said, I've been listening to you. He was also a student, and I've got to give you this thing. And it was James Brown live at the Apollo, and he was not known particularly in those days, and it just blew me away. I mean, talk about the response in gospel music, it's just very fervent, but he was doing it with an everyday crowd, not in the church at all, and the interplay between him and the audience was just phenomenal. And of course, he was a fantastic dancer. So when in between Reading University and doing the thing in Paris, I for a short while was I worked in a shoe shop in Tottenham Court Road, and they had these stacks of shoe boxes, and so in between when the customers were there, I managed to move the stacks so that they left about this much, about 3 feet, a yard, or maybe 4 feet behind the shoes. And I used to go in there, and then when I finished serving somebody, I'd go in and practice my James Brown moves.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Because you couldn't see me at all. The shoe boxes were right up to nearly to the ceiling. So nobody could see me doing my James Brown. And then practice my screaming. And then that led to actually singing while I was screaming. And that came up into the very high voice stuff that I do.
So the Crazy World of Arthur Brown actually draws a lot of influences from soul and gospel, you would say.
Oh, absolutely. Vincent wasn't so much aware of soul, but I in that thing with Paris, I became aware of Nina Simone and all the the stylistic things that she had, and the fervor and the chanting and all of this, so that I already had that when Vincent and I first met in 66, and brought it in. And of course he a fantastic modern jazz pianist and classically trained, could compose, conduct, and all of that. And was a boogie player of great capacity. I mean, just because he was one of these people who could talk all day. He could be funny all day. He could sometimes be really nasty. But he could boogie on the piano without stop, hour after hour. And you wouldn't find very much that he actually repeated in 4 hours. It was just phenomenal. He just endless creativity. So you put that in together with his musical styles and different tastes. And then you added the drummer, Drayson Thieker, who was the first person and only person I knew at that time who had the complete Smithsonian collection of African records with all the tribal rhythms and everything. And you'll find some of those in the Crazy World. And Vincent, of course, would take those rhythms from Vincent and add his chordal knowledges, which were phenomenal. And Drayson also loved avant-garde music and electronic music. And so you put that in the mix with my love of soul, folk, classical, rock, Indian, and we had quite a good underpinning. Music.
Absolutely. I mean, this record, I mean, it's there's two. You've got. I mean, I love the song "Coffin Confessions." By the way, I really enjoyed that one. Once I can't read it without my glasses. Once I had Illusions Part 1, and once I had Illusions Part 2. I'm just wondering, is there a concept regarding this record? As it seems to suggest there might be.
Well, yes, it's the long road, and partly the long road. Where does here we are now. Where did it begin musically?
Yeah.
And so inside, this is a box set, and so there's the written book there. Small, it's I'd forgotten how many pages, and in that there is a tree, wonderful Laurie Avon, who does the most amazing pictures and caricatures. There, look at that. That's it.
Wonderful.
But then the roots. Say you have the roots of the tree. That's my father playing Charlie Coon's boogie music. And then up here we got one of the branches, my mother's voice. So it was the roots in terms of looking at also the sound of waves on the pounding in a northeasterly gale in Whitby, and the sighing of the wind and all that. That was some of the rhythms underneath my music. And then my mother's singing, my father's singing, playing the pianos. But this is all including in the booklet, and it's part of the journey musically, where it began, and to look back now at that beginning,
right,
and to have that in, because Rick Patton is his roots, as we were saying, is kind of the same as mine, and so we can just fall into different styles, and it's terribly well, it's very a great pleasure to do that, and it's great fun and easy to do. Just it rolls out, and so that's part of the road. And then the other part of the road is, here we are. I'm born at a time when they were our houses. The first two houses, one was in Whipps Cross Road in London. That was bombed, and the whole of because it was in the East End of London. The flat, so everything was on fire. Moved to the hotel in Whitby that my grandparents had. That was obliterated also. So that comes through, and where are we now? It's the same thing happening all over again, and it happens all the way down history. So that's another long road that is included in it. And and so not only roots, but what are the changes now in the musical style, and also what are we've got Marco Selli doing the final imprint mix, and of course he does a lot for the stage sound of U2, and he has this wonderful ear, very immediate ear.
Good.
And so for the final stamp onto what it's going to sound like when you actually play it, as opposed to what it sounds like in the studio, or when you're finalizing the mix. That was a lovely. They've got better equipment now for doing all of that.
Well, I'll certainly put a purchasing link for this album below this video. I recommend anyone who's watching this definitely go and buy this album. But you're going on the road soon, aren't you? You're planning something special for a tour. What do you want to talk a little bit about that?
We're actually in the middle of it. We're actually almost ending it. We play in London on the 25th, which is in Bush Hall.
Yeah.
And of course, it is the same day that the Stones are playing. So,
well, who wants to go to see the Stones when they can come to the crazy world of Arthur Brown?
Exactly. So, well, I'm going to say I might go and see the Stones, but I wouldn't. I'd be on stage. Yeah. So the show is of course, what most people know about me is the flaming helmet and fire. That's a great beginning, and of course, a lot in terms of business. A lot of that in the 60s, things contracts got manipulated, changed, until you end up owning very little as the artist. So Claire, my manager and partner, have spent 7 years getting back all of that, so that we now have the rights to the name, the God of Hellfire, and all of these things that go with it, so that we actually can, make a living, as opposed to watching all these other people living really well. And thinking, well, that's nice. I'm glad you made our music famous. But so we decided, well, okay, if that's what we're doing, then we have to look at the meaning of that symbol and the god of hellfire. What does it mean? Is it relevant anymore? We feel it is, and we're getting a lot of, for instance, a lot of attention from rap, young rap artists now. Just started about a year ago, and so they're feeling it's quite relevant. And so we decide, okay, well, if we're going to sort out the meaning and say, well, yeah, it's not. Some people thought it was demonic and black magic and all of that stuff. It wasn't actually. It's just, okay, if you can see everything immediately like a child can, but have the wisdom with as well to be able to distinguish between, okay, then what follows from what I'm looking at, then you have a chance of like leading a we might call it harmonious or balanced life, and maybe society has a chance of having a different basis for sorting out disagreements.
Sure.
Basically, we're still into it in various forms, slugging it out, and okay, that's but there must be a better way of actually determining the share of money, the share of power, the share of food. Must be a better. And so that whatever prevents our consciousness being able to operate in that other way is, you might call, the basic human being, unfettered by selfishness, greed, ego, all of that. So then if the life one has lived has been, through whatever reason, based on that greed and egotistical desire for, I've got to have it no matter, even if it means someone else is going to be face down in the mud, then if that's blocking the harmonious way of living, then the god of hellfire is the one that can step in and burn away the stuff, and that happens internally for each person as well as for a society. So the theme of the god of hellfire is carried in the new show, but the new show goes sort of steps further than that in terms of it's called a human perspective, and it's looking at all the different levels of the consciousness we have, and how do they look, how do they fit together, and it's not so much what do you prefer, it's just laid out there. And of course, then that means we have the visual show. The music represents all of that. Different themes represent different parts of the consciousness. And then the visuals are quite stunning, and that's Claire's operation with initially somebody, Andy, who used to do the visuals for Yes, and had a very surreal view of life. And then he left to have a child. And so we've got Robin O'Keefe. He's getting to grips with it now. And so it's a show that has projections, screens, and different levels, different colorings, different lightings, and also costumes of a particular kind. Don't want to give it all away. And so it has both the music and the visuals have a great deal of flexibility and interaction. And of course, then there's the interaction with the kind of dance movements. And so it's a great show. It's
sounds fabulous. I mean, I've got to ask you, there's an interesting quotation from Pete Townsend, and he says, the hippie movement had come out of political confusion, desperation, fantasy, and drug-fueled hope. Is he right, or is he just being a bit of a curmudgeon?
Well, you know, Pete, he did like to look underneath the surface of everything. And so I think there was, in the end, I'm not sure that, I thought it was born out of, initially, there was a movement in Germany, I think in the 1800s, where people wanted to go back to the land and to living in a different way, and the diet was, you know, helping to moderate the mind, etc. And some of them moved to America, and they started up, and it's slowly gathered momentum. And when all that was happening, and then the Vietnam War came up, and so I suppose there was a slightly different way it happened for people in England and in America, because America had never really been, you know, attacked as a whole by another country. And so the whole thing of the Vietnam War was, it struck a very, very, very tender heart.
Yeah.
And so the growth in America was from that. And of course there was opposition because they had all sorts of new ideas and had little sort of reverence for the way things had been done, particularly for years and years, and how they did concentrate on a hope that there was a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
And that there was a possibility for life to be, for instance, that life was up until then based on the notion of one of the great things was duty, sense of duty. And they said, well, you could have duty, but you could actually base life on play. Mm-hmm. Play rather than, you know, now you must discipline yourself, ready for the final duty, which is to go out and shoot people. They thought, no, I don't think we do have to do that. And so, of course, they came into conflict with governmental people, and Mr. Reagan was one of the hardliners in that regard. In England, you know, it was a little different. We'd already had you know, the Second World War on in our homes. You know, I mean, so there was an underpinning of a desire for a different kind of life based on a different approach. Because, you know, a lot for instance, when I was going to school, it was a boys' school. It was not a public school. It was, you know, it later became a comprehensive. But every teacher in that school had come out of the armed forces in the war, and lots of them had PTSD, and some of them would take it out on the pupils, And of course, the pupils go, well, surely there must be a different approach we can have. This is not how I want to live my life. Some people go from school and think, oh, I really had a great time at school. And you do, but the underpinning on it still, very ancient ways of looking at things that were not based on cooperation with nature. So there.
Well, I mean, talking of Pete Townsend, apparently Townsend was considering Rael as part of a rock opera in which he envisaged you as being the hero. Did he ever speak to you about that?
Yes, he did, and it was going ahead. It was about really about China and
Israel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was, because Pete was involved with spiritual movements and things, he knew all about those, and but he could also see the social movements and everything, and so he liked the idea of a lead singer who could dance and had some kind of operatic range to the voice, and was able to be sort of iconoclastic and sort of sensational, if you like, but also was an interest in those things that he was writing about. And so, I was going to be initially that one. That it morphed into Tommy, and there was a time when Pete was thinking of me doing Tommy, and Kit Lambert said, "No, we've got to keep that for the band, the Who. We're going to, and of course that's been borne out as a very good thing, because the Who is still one of the top bands in the world. Quite amazing.
You got a part in the Tommy movie, though, didn't you, as the priest? So you did play some part.
He tried to get me doing about 4 parts. The one was the doctor, one was the let me see. One was Tommy. One was the part that
Elton John.
Yeah, that was another one that they were considering. But I think Stigwood was the producer, and he decided who he wanted in there. And I only got in there because at a certain point, Eric Clapton had the part of the preacher, I think, or something like that. And he just didn't, after he did part of it, he just didn't want to do the rest of it. So I came in, and they made it into a different character. I'm singing part of the same song as Eric Clapton. And I must say, for me, Townsend was a very, very influential figure, because when he came and said, I'd like to make a demos with you and then present them to the record company. I'd been in one little studio with I'll think of the name in a minute. He's from the Yardbirds, and he was the producer of a rag record I did at Reading University. But apart from that, I had no knowledge of studios. And so Pete was able to show me and the crazy world a lot of the possibilities, because he liked to think out of the box as well, and what we could do with the sound. And then when you added Lambert in there, Kit Lambert, I mean, he was one of those producers who just go like, it's all very well. And then he would just slide the slider up until the room was shaking with distortion. And he said, that's it. And then you'd sort of later squash it so it would fit and sound a bit like an organ. And so with Pete was very helpful in the, and he actually had a big part in deciding that Fire would be the single.
Sure. How did you become involved in the film The Committee, and what are your memories of Syd Barrett?
The Committee was done. I was in playing in UFO at the time, and we had become sort of one of the house bands. And I met some people, Landisman, Jay Landisman and Fran Landisman, and they had been part of the people who helped to form the English UFO Club in its beginnings. And they used to have dinners, and at the dinners, I met Paul Jones, the Manfred Mann lead singer, and he was the lead actor in The Committee. And I think it was through they came down to UFO, the film people, just to see what was going on, because it was the changing art scene. And then at the dinners with Paul, they decided, we want this in the and of course the Floyd were the ones who did the main part of the soundtrack. And Syd, we obviously talked. I haven't had a recollection of a single word.
Yes.
I mean, it was amazing to be in that club, because there were just so many inventive people came in, and you realize that rock it didn't have a necessity to play in any particular way. Nor did you. Well, one of Syd's great things was that he didn't necessarily make a song conform to what a song was supposed to have as a shape. And so all of that influenced me just listening to it.
I was interested, the Sunday Mirror said of the 14-hour Technicolor Dream that it was like the last struggle of a doomed tribe trying to save itself from extinction. Were they right? What were your memories of that event?
Well, the original 14-hour Technicolor Dream, the one where John Lennon saw it on TV and came rushing down, and there was Yoko and everything. And that was, to my mind, you started off with UFO, and the principle of UFO was experimentation, both in dance troupes, political ideas. You might have naked guys spouting off some political idea, walking around the club, and that was part of it. It wasn't things they were trying to, oh gosh, throw him out. No, they welcomed it. And so for me, those ideas, we did some concerts up in Yorkshire, in a few of the northern places. So the idea of the underground grew like that, really. And that sort of spread the ideas that you could experiment musically. And there was a big one an article in the News of the World that said, most of you are wondering, what is a hippie? And then it showed me in my makeup and said, look at this. Arthur Brown is a hippie. Plain, diffident, decadent, daft, and disgusting, we call it. And then it described a wild party I was supposed to be at. It was a UFO gig, actually.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be a party. And so when it went to the 14-hour Technicolor Dream, it was kind of like, well, okay, now we want the mass audience to do this. And of course, that meant money was more involved in it, and who was going to make the money. If you're a promoter there, it's like, okay, we've got to pay that band that they'll accept, or they'll do it for nothing, and then the money resides where it usually did. And so to me, it was great that all those ideas got out, but it was a commercialization of it, which on the one hand permeated rock music and pop music through the various radio shows and the pirate radios and stuff like that, and became an underpinning of a lot of the musics. And a lot of great music came out of it. But at the same time, a lot of money was floating in, and a lot of the ideals were beginning to drift out. And of course you had the same, also the effect in England, that the police were politicized, and that the people who were heading initially this whole experimental art movement were in jail, or were fined so heavily that they were no longer operating. So between the two of those forces, the whole thing ironed out. And then in the next decade, say like the 70s to early 80s, you had a lot of people coming to the conclusion that, whatever they had taken or used or whatever to obtain these different visions, all disappeared when you weren't taking whatever you took. So a lot of them who were quite serious about changing the psyche and everything went into these groups on retreat or for courses in different spiritual disciplines from around the world, and they didn't reform clubs and things, but that went in and underpinned even business. And so even now you get things coming out that are based on those ideas, people trying to, live cooperatively and stuff. And so they did spread, and even though the exploratory music for a time was locked down because the TV managed to still be able to control the music outlet. And so it became sort of more of the same, of the same, of the same. Yeah. But you can't stop people playing around with things, especially if technology brings them in new ways of making music and sounds. You can press a little button and it goes da 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 da. Okay, but I don't have to learn how to play music. I can just press buttons and make some music out of it. And so it never stops. But I still felt that 14-hour Technicolor Dream was an amazing thing, but it was the beginning of the commercialization of it, which into which it gradually disappeared.
And, you worked with, of course, we had Carl Palmer as a drummer, and I'm just wondering what your early impressions of him are, and did you enjoy what he went on to do with Emerson, Lake and Palmer?
Oh, Well, Carl, when he joined us, he was about 17. He'd come from Chris Farlow's band, who's still out there singing, still great.
Atomic Rooster.
Yes, Atomic Rooster, and his version of what is it? It was one of the early blues songs. I'll think of it, and it was the one that all the bands that were just beginning and coming up, that's what they listened to if they wanted to know what an English blues singer could sing. He was, and yeah, so he came, Carl Palmer came from that band, and he was a very jovial, happy individual.
Yeah.
He was someone who had his head screwed on financially right from the beginning. When he came into the band, we were just making the video for the Fire single, so he was on that, you know, that single video, and he already had a substantial bank account at that age, you know. But he also loved the idea of avant-garde theatrical performance, visuals, and so for him, the idea that we were already involved in, he jumped into it wholeheartedly. He had a lot of energy, and of course, he was fearless and unstoppable as a drummer. It was a different style to Dration Seeker, but and so we became a little more consistently approachable commercially. When he went on to with Keith Emerson, that was quite astonishing, because he had learned with us all about stage production and you know, giant gestures, and so Emerson jumped in on that in an extraordinary manner, and I think they were one of the most successful, along with George Clinton, you know, the visual side of rock, and you could say that there was a lot of sensationalism in their act, and that the idea of a 3-ton drum kit.
You reckon that a lot of that's come over from the Crazy World of Arthur Brown?
The idea came, but not. Those were things that they developed, and the idea of, you know, playing the top note of the solo in time, but using the throw of a knife blade into the actual keyboard, and leaping over your organ, and you know, Carl having his astonishing drum kit. It was pure entertainment, but they were very serious about the style of music. Emerson, when he had the nice, it was very, very experimental sonically. I thought he was astonishing there. Yeah. And he hit on the classical thing to, you know, as a part of that, and then used it in King Crimson, in
Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah, much more in a different manner, and I thought he has his own style, which is not straightforward rock. He always thinks of himself, he said, as a punk drummer, but he had, for instance, he was going out with Buddy Rich's daughter, and we used to go over there while he was with the Crazy World and talk to Buddy Rich.
Wow.
About drumming and the style that he got from the big band playing, you know. So I thought, Carl, that what they did, because they actually did also because of Emerson. I think he did things that he believed in, and yeah, it wasn't just shallow showmanship for the sake of showmanship.
I got an interesting quote actually. Frank Zappa once said, "Jazz isn't dead; it just smells funny." Do you think the same could be said about rock music in this day and age?
Well, in as far as anything that has a kind of pounding or a particular approach to rhythm. I mean, do you say that swing is not rock? Mm-hmm. Or do you say rock actually includes swing? So then when you do that, you call it progressive. Yeah. And then if you're doing progressive with lots of technicality, you call it prog. Yeah.
So things evolve.
Yeah, and you've just put different names for it because it entices an audience to come in. You know, so everybody likes a new fashion for a new generation, so or even quicker now, and so you just call it something else, and it is, you know, if you listen to a lot of the rockabilly stuff, it is still like the very early stuff, but it's got a twist, and it's got a different kind of lyric, the things they're talking about.
Well, you talk about the things changing. I mean, you experimented a lot with electronic drums on your Journey album, I believe. That was quite groundbreaking stuff. I mean, were you a fan of the kind of where all that went with that electronic minimalism, especially in the 1980s?
Yeah, in the 60s, you had Wendy Carlos, Walter Carlos, you know.
And the whole krautrock movement going over in Europe as well.
Yeah, and you know, Dracian loved avant-garde electronic music, so I listened to a lot with him and began to really love it myself in terms of. And so when it came to the idea that we were still getting problems on stage where the drums would drown out. And so the possibility of interplay between the other musicians was limited. And so when the current drummer at that time ran off with the van, our van, and said, "I'm not coming back," just thought, okay, let's try a machine. And of course, I played it, and we decided we wanted to sound like the rock equivalent of a string quartet.
Oh, wow.
Where each instrument had an equal value. And therefore, you know, and also you can totally govern the volume of that instrument. So it's not something that suddenly the guitar has to play loud because the drum's playing loud. There is a certain excitement in that. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to be able to do something different. And of course, we had also the projections going with it. And that early one was the Bentley Rhythm Ace. I think it was an offshoot or a very early offshoot of Roland Records, Roland drum machine people. And then as the others came out, Oberheim a bit later, and the Fairlight came in with all the sampling, then I made several albums with all of that stuff before it became really popular.
Yeah, I think most people seem to acknowledge the fact that you're a hugely influential artist in many respects. You know, you've only got to look at, I mean, even metal and goth rock and shock rock and all that, all doff their cap to Arthur Brown, of course, but even with this technology, I think that I think many ways you could be seen as an influence there as well, I guess.
Yeah, I think that there's such a change possible. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've been trying to get going is a club where you have this brain, like they do brain imagery now.
Okay,
imaging, see what's happening in the brain. And then you can turn that, rather than just looking what's happening inside, you can turn it the other way around, so that the brain is pushing out the sound. And what we tried to focus on was the part of the brain that makes decisions, where decisions are rooted. Because for a solo in music, you're making decisions about where it's going to go, where the next note. And so we found a way to do that with electronics. And so with a dance club based on that rather than a band, where you get 4 people coming together, there's a kind of energy developed between the 4 as they're having fun. Well, if that was played out as music, you'd have a different kind of disco.
You would. It's fascinating. I mean,
so,
go on.
All those kinds of ideas as technology develops, I just like them, and I think, wow, you could do this with it or that.
Yeah. I mean, interesting quote again from Psychedelic Baby magazine. I think it's from you. Galactic Zoo Dossier was about looking at a spiritual quest in the context of earning money, assassination, wrongful arrests, and it was posed in terms of us all being prisoners in a galactic zoo. Is that album as pertinent now as it was then?
I actually think it is, yeah. Absolutely. Because we've opted to go with the form of capitalism we developed, and it's based on individuality, and there's a beauty in individuality, but where it comes to being able to work together, that's a different thing, and where it becomes more involved with just power than cooperation. We look at what's going on in over in Ukraine and everything, China with, it's all happening exactly the same.
Yeah.
With different weapons.
Yeah.
That's all. And so I think those questions that were asked in Galactic Zoo, and I think that some of the music still retains its excitement now. When we play that stuff, there's the audience, even the young people, still love it.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly do as well. It was reissued through Cherry Red Records in a nice box set recently. It's a wonderful album. I only have one more question for you, really. It's a question that's been put to me by one of my subscribers. The question is, Arthur reunited with members of Kingdom Come at the Astoria in London on the 12th of March 2005. The show was filmed but never released. Is there any chance that we might get a DVD release of that show?
Yes, there is. And it now is recently become part of the back catalogue owned by Esoteric, who are part of Cherry Red.
Yeah.
And so they, at a certain time, it will appear.
And this new show sounds fantastic. I hope you're going to be filming that.
We are, yes. We're. I think we're going to wait. Not the this last concert of the present tour. We need a different sort of room to be able to do the filming properly. But yeah, we will be filming that.
Oh. This album is, I've done a review of this on my channel. It's a wonderful album, and I do recommend it to anybody. There will be a purchasing link just below this video for this album, which is called The Long, Long Road. Long, Long Road. Arthur, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I wish you the very best of luck with this wonderful album and your tour, of course, which you've still got a few more dates left, I believe. And other than that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
I will, and I've enjoyed this interview as well, and thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's been nice chatting with you.
Yeah.
The £1,000 for that painting. If you change your mind, let me know.
Don't forget 2 million rubles, and I'll give you.
We'll see what we can do. Thank you very much. Actually, the ruble is plummeting in value at the moment. 2 million rubles won't be worth much in about a few weeks' time. Anyway, Arthur, thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Bye-bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.